Hello, DigiFam. It is me, Prodigious, back at it again, and I am going to go over my first ever ban list restriction video. Now, in a couple days, we're going to get a new ban list restriction here for the good old year of 2025, and I think it'd be good to go ahead and just have a general discussion. Now, this is not going to be anything that I am calling out as dead set cards that I believe are going to get hit. Some of these are just cards that I believe within good reason to some extent should be hit. If they are, they are. If they're not, they're not. A couple of them are cards that I could see getting hit, even though I don't really think they should be. And then there's some that I think 100% should be hit. And there's also some that, based off of a quick survey of sorts, scouring the internet, I had discovered that there is certain cards that people are thinking and predicting could very well be coming up on the next hit. And then last but not least, of course, a couple of these cards are going to be cards, in my opinion, whether you agree with them or not, are definitely needing a hit. But anyway, with all that said and done, let's take a look at this stuff and see what we can get into, shall we? All right. So first up, we have, of course, the main culprit. That is Mirage Galgamon. Many people think this card need to get hit. And I'm inclined to believe them. Because we're at this point now in the game of where almost everything in some shape, form, or fashion allows you to draw cards and try to add stuff to your hand, whether you want to or not. I mean, your opponent can obviously even trigger this effect and make you add a card to your hand. And it's gotten to the point of where this has almost become a floodgate. So with that being said, I think it needs to be hit and gone down to 1. Now, some of you might also be looking at these two cards. I only have these on here because I believe one, if not both, but definitely at least one, need to be hit to limit 1 per deck in order to do something about the Galaxy deck. Now, the Galaxy deck by itself is nothing that terribly bad. It's a good deck, and it should have its own right to exist and all that. But the main problem is that people at this point have gotten to where they just use the Galaxy deck skeleton, or the cards of it, for anything generically good in terms of red or blue. And you combine that with the fact that we're starting to get into territories of where we're obviously seeing cards that have more than one color or more than one way of going into other colors, it just becomes a bit ridiculous. So I think rather Lunamon itself, with its ability to bounce itself and gain back 2 memory, needs to be hit down to 1, or they need to hit the Ko and Sayo. That would not leave this deck unable to have a memory setter. There's plenty of memory setters they could put in here, whether it be red or blue. I mean, heck, they could even take a page from other people's books and splash something else into it. They give it a different color memory setter. But still, nonetheless, it could have a memory setter and still function just fine. So one of these needs to take a hit and go down to 1. I'm not sure which, but in my opinion, one of those two, if not both. All right, now let's move on to the next one. So, just like last time, to tackle a problem deck, I have two cards here that are both optional to go on the chopping block. The more obvious one is for, of course, a certain deck, and that is for the Fenrilugamon Takamekazuchi, mainly the more aggro build that we've had up until BT 2.5. What makes this little egg so powerful is the fact that its effect is not once per turn. It would scale that deck back and make it be a little more in tune with other cards in terms of their power and their speed if this was to go to limit 1. That, or the alternative, which I think is something they should do, but they probably won't because Bandai doesn't strike me as a type to go in and do an errata for cards unless, of course, they screwed up royally in terms of the actual original text. But that would be to make this card be a your turn once per turn effect. So if they don't do that, the only other option would be to have this egg go to 1. Then that means they'd have to use the other Balmon that has a different effect, similar but different effect, and it is once per turn. Now, the other two cards here, and I am majorly a purple player myself, so I know how important these two cards are. So I'm there with you when I take the hit when I talk about this, but one, if not both, of these cards should go to 1. Reason why is because we already know they hit Hammerspark. Hammerspark was a card that was blue, that if you play it from hand, it was free. It gave you 1 memory. It also had a security effect that said gain 2. Well, Jack Raids here, in a purple deck, which purple loves to put stuff in trash, this card can easily get you more than 1 memory when you play it. On top of its security effect that gives you 2, so if your opponent hits into it, you're gaining 2 anyway. But when it's in your hand in a purple deck, you can make this give you more than 2 memory. So for the same reasons they hit Hammerspark, I could see Jack Raid getting hit. Especially since there's a certain purple hybrid deck that seems to be the bit of a big boogeyman in a lot of tournaments. But with that being said, this card would probably just hit purple in general. I do believe the Matashita going to 1 would really slow down the purple hybrid decks. Because the whole loop thing that they can do, it stops dead in its tracks and they have to figure out something else to do if they can't keep on looping with this card. So I could see this card getting hit to 1. And again, I'm mainly a purple player myself, so I know what I'm saying. Now on to the next batch. Okay, so next is the Kazuhamon and Talmon Ace. Both of these cards are up here because, you can guess it, of the Talmon Loop deck that has been out and about. Now, I haven't had a chance to play this. I have played against it. And it's almost like sitting there once they get their pieces and go off, like you're just sitting there watching somebody play solitaire. And then when they finally run out of moves, you have nothing you can do and no way of coming back. So that is 0 interaction. And they got rid of, what was it? It was that paired ban list that kept certain cards from being played just to prevent a turn that would never end. Well, this falls close to that same category, I feel like. Not quite there, but close. So the best way to probably nip that in the bud is probably to make Talmon Ace itself go to 1, or the Kazuhamon that is blue and has the ability to pop that lower level out of itself, not to mention give you access to the Kaiser Nail card they could easily play to also repeat the process. I mean, outside of probably hitting Kaiser Nail itself, but I don't think that's really taking care of the problem. So I think one of these two, if not both, are bound to end up on the ban restriction list. If they don't, then I guess we're just in for a bunch of decks that are running the loop. Now, another card that I got up on here that I think is a possible hit. Not saying I want it to, because I would like for this card to be untouched, but at the same time, it could get hit. And that is X Antibody Protoform. Now, my reasoning behind this is because a lot of decks run this at multiples, like 2 or 3. And the fact this is a card that every deck can just put into their deck, and it constantly does the same thing over and over, which is to A, put itself back into security, giving you a form of recovery, and it will just come back to your hand when it gets hit. And then second, it does retrieve back another piece. So I don't know what the likelihood of it being on Bandai's radar is, but I think it's a possible. Not a very good possible, but a possible. Alright, now, as you can see here, I have the infamous Red Hybrid promo card of a Gunimon, of where when attacking, you can Digivolve and go into Ancient Greymon for a cost of 2, and then you delete yourself at the end of turn, along with the inheritable of when it would Digivolve into Ancient Greymon, you reduce it by 2. So both effects are just got to do with the Ancient Greymon side of things. Reason why I think this needs to get hit, or could get hit, is because overall, that means the red Ancient Greymon deck has access to a total of 8 cards in their deck that they can just speed straight from level 4 into Ancient, hit you for 2 security, pop something, and then it just disappears. No interaction. Now, this I could see, and probably does need to get hit, going to 1. Just that way it would kind of mellow it down a little bit, because we already have 4 common cards in the form of an Agunimon from BT17 that does basically the same thing. It allows you to go ahead and just go into it and then go into Ancient Grey. So I think the Ancient Grey deck needs to have this go down to 1. But again, that's just a thought on my side. I could be totally wrong on this, but I just thought it might be a fun one to go ahead and put in here and have your thoughts on it. Now, the other 2 cards here goes into a well-known deck, which is very strong. As a matter of fact, I think it has topped at plenty of tournaments and regionals, and that is our good old Impildramon. Now, the Davis and Ken Tamer from BT16. This card makes it so that way you can gain memory when you Digivolve. When you DNA, you get to trash any 3 sources under your opponent's Digimon. Any 3. So it can target multiple things. It can target so many things. On top of its ability of Star Main Phase to just play a Vmon or Wormmon, which they have searchers in both versions of those cards. So you're basically getting free continuous searches off of that with this Tamer, on top of everything else. You combine that with, like I was saying earlier with the Galaxy deck, you got people splashing in other top ends that have nothing to do with Impildramon in terms of DNAing, Like, one big event had someone splash in Hexablaumon. So that means after they got done DNAing and they stripped a bunch of sources, which goes hand in hand with Hexablau, they went into Hexablau, and now all of a sudden the opponent couldn't do anything. So not only did they have partition protection and strip sources, and they could continue to search and get their stuff ready for another big stack. It's just a very strong card. Does too much for the deck, and the deck already does a lot. I'm a fan of Impilgermon, but I believe this card needs to go to 1. Now, another possible hit, just like how we've seen with some other cards, just like how we've seen with, the name escapes me at the moment, but it's the Awakening of the Golden Knight card that we got that was supposed to be for Magna X. We have this card, which can pretty much do the same thing. One of your Digimon may Digivolve into a level 5 or higher Digimon card with the free trait at a cost reduced by 4. So this is just like that card. If they hit that card, then they need to probably hit this card as well, because this is just giving you another card that you can run 4 of to go ahead and just cheek your way into a higher level 5. That doesn't necessarily have to be Impilgermon. It can be a Magna X. Speaking of which, yes, I do have Magna X on here. Now, the likelihood of them actually banning restriction a secret rare card is low. Probably won't even happen. I feel like, personally, at this state in the game, with us getting closer and closer to being unionized in terms of everything globally coming out at the same time, Bandai will have to start stepping up their game in terms of taking care of certain cards. This card came out back in BT16. It's been out for quite a few sets now. Next set will be BT21. So I think by now, this will be a card that is possibly on the chopping block. Therefore, I am adding it to this list because I believe it really does need to go. Reason why is because this, like I earlier mentioned, is so easy to go into now. Mixing it into various versions of decks. All you have to do is have something that has either X antibody or armor form. It's not the typical X antibody that just looks for a name. It's looking for a type. And there's a lot of those types available. On top of the fact that there is so many chances and opportunities of where people can play this and get the effect to trigger continuously. Turn after turn after turn on both players' turns. On top of the fact that its protection effect is unlike all the other cards that we have right now in the game that has protection effects. If you look at so many other cards that have come out, both recently and in the past, they usually have protection in some form or manner under certain conditions. But even if they do have protection, it's usually a limited protection, like it might just be protected from Digimon effects. It might be protected from option cards, or it gains protection for ever so long under these conditions. Problem with Magna X is its conditions are so easily triggered that it just cannot be dealt with. Once on the board, it's just there. The only way to probably get around this deck is to go wide. Which brings me to Shoto. This is a card, and I love it myself, but everyone can splash this into almost any deck, not just a deck that it was intended for, and instantly gain a Digimon that has blocker. Especially the Mother D Reaper decks. If you're going to hit the Magna, which I believe strongly should be, you also need to take care of this card on the Mother D Reaper side. Or just other decks that splash it in general, because basically Magna X and Shoto are both in the same league. Both of them are just big bodies that are just there that can block whatever. Magna X can swing without having to worry about anything. The D Reaper's mother can just sit there and block without worrying about anything. But I believe they should hit this if they also hit the Magna X. This is one of those things of where if you hit one thing for being a similar problem, you need to hit the other, because if you don't, it's just going to let the other one run rampant. Same thing, if they were to hit Shoto, then that just means the Magna X will run even more rampant than it does now. But if you think about it, this Shoto card gets splashed into so many decks, especially the Mother D Reaper combo. But it's originally intended for Vortex Warriors. If you limit to the 1 per deck, people can still splash it, they just won't always see it. And a deck that does want to run it mainly because it belongs in there, the Vortex Warriors from Liberator, if they see it, they get benefits from it more so than other people do, which is the way it's supposed to be. And then, of course, the guy over here in the corner, Lobomon, similar reasons as I gave for Agunimon. We already have 4 copies of a common card that does the same thing. Time to time to kind of take it back a peg, make it so that way you can't constantly be spamming your ancients quite that much. So, that's my thoughts on these. And again, this is going to mainly be my big thing that I wish they would hit, but they probably won't, because again, it just came out, and Bandai is not in the history of hitting secret rares, especially if they've just come out. But I do believe, if not now, sometime in the future, they might hit this card. The reason why is because, just like so many other cards, it's splashable, but it's a little too splashable and does so much for so very little. But that's mainly been put in here, mainly kind of a little ha-ha moment like this is going to happen. Everything else that I've gone over here today is cards that I believe are good targets for the chopping block. Now, come the ban restriction list here soon, if we do see any of these on there, that means I was right in my logic to some extent. And if you agree with me on these, then that means you are right as well. But yeah, that's the cards I think should get hit or have speculations and reasonings on them being hit. And like I said before, you can't really hit one problem child card without hitting the other. That's why I kind of have both the Lobo and Aguni. That's why I have both Magna X and Shoto. I mean, if you take care of one dog, you gotta do something to take care of the other. If you have one deck that seems like it's can't be interacted with, Purple Hybrid, then you gotta do something about the other deck that seems like it can't be interacted with. And it's just kind of time that we start, or at least I believe Bandai should start, really paying attention to these cards that are just really strong that get splashed into every deck. I'm not saying you can't have cards that get splashed in. I mean, that takes away from the creative fun of Digimon. But when you have some cards that are just generically getting splashed into almost every deck, like the Shotos, like the Medieval Gallantmons, like the Protoforms, just to run them, I mean, it's getting a little out of hand on that front. I'm not saying we're going to become Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it's tapping into the scenario of where, oh, everybody runs the same cards in their deck. So, yep, that's been my little video on it. I could be totally wrong. If I am, I am. But if you have any other thoughts or reasons on what you think should be hit, or heck, like I said, what shouldn't be hit, just take into consideration what I've said here today. We've just got a lot of good cards here that, yes, seem innocent on their own, but at this point in the game, and with how the game is now unified globally, Bandai will have to start being more on their toes and not letting us go so long with so many broken combos. They need a better playtesting team or something. But at the same time, I could be 100% wrong. Like Magna X may not get hit, Shoto may not get hit, Medieval Gallantmon may never get hit, Kazuha and Talmon may never get hit, Balmon may never get hit, Purple Hybrid, they might not touch it at all. I could be 100% wrong, and maybe every single card I have on here today is something that won't get touched at all. Maybe it'll be some bunch of random commons and uncommons. Now, as for the opposite side of the spectrum, could we see something come off of the ban restriction list? I tried skimming through the list to just see what exactly is on there and what their reasonings were. Honestly, the only thing I could see that might get taken off of the ban restriction list and brought back to where you can run 4 of it again is probably Bukomon. The little egg that says if you have more sources than your opponent, this card gains jamming. Only because at this point, if you really looked into it and did a search, we have a bunch of rookies and other cards that just give you jamming for free with no conditions. So why not just bring back the Bukomon back to 4? Because at this point, if you're going to keep an egg for a conditional jamming, then why aren't they hitting a bunch of these other blue cards that just give you jamming for free? Actually, now that I said that out loud, I'll laugh my ass off if come the ban restriction list they add a bunch of the blue commons and uncommons that we've gotten recently that instantly just give you jamming. Yeah, that might be another little side prediction I'll put in here. Yeah, they could end up doing that. And then we'll all be like, what the heck? But anyway, that has been your good friend Prodigious. And I got some more videos I'm going to be getting out there here soon. So until then, I'll see ya. Keep it real.